Everyone, just logging in now. So Stefan is a very close childhood friend of mine. We've known each other, I guess, since I've been, what, like 17, 16 now, and we've been friends since then. So part of why I wanted to talk to Stefan was kind of get his perspective on where are machine learning ideas becoming more relevant in finance. And as part of Stefan's background, like Stefan works currently as a risk analyst at State Street. We're not probably not going to be talking about stuff that Stefan actually does at work, but more get his perspective on in general these trends in the industry. So Stefan, amazing to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I can't talk a lot about what I do at work. I can talk generally, what the industry does, what type of work my company does. But again, I'm not here as a representative of my company or of my work. I mean, I think it's I'll try to provide as much information and background as possible, as long as I'm not kind of hinging on things that are kind of internally specific to the work that my team does. Besides that, very happy to be here. I'm very excited about this conversation. I think the company, everyone in the finance industry has a lot to learn, and can leverage a lot of the technologies that are being developed these days. And I think it's also I see this as a way for me to also learn more always, but also of course share knowledge and information. I think this is always a very special time and special moments that are key moments, and let you advance in whatever you're looking to do, right? Work or elsewise. So yeah, that I think that being put aside, I think we can probably get started. I think, and in my mind, we can structure it the way you want, but in my mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about the links that I already see between machine learning and finance, and then from there we can kind of keep a free form and go into subjects that you're interested in, that I'm interested in, etc.
Yeah, like I think that sounds good. So maybe just to kind of level set, there are definitely like some applications that I've observed that, like when I think about it, I'm like, oh, like how is this done already? And then like potentially how would machine learning help that specific application? So the first one for me that actually comes to mind is rating models. So when I think of businesses like Moody and the S&P 500. My current understanding is that this is still a fairly manual process, like that you would have like people that work at these companies that would pour over like publicly available documentation for various like public companies, aggregate that information and then like rank them in some sort of manual way, and then say, okay, well, here's how we're ranking stuff, and accordingly, here's the A, B, C, D rank for there. And so,
Hmm.
like, I had two questions there. So, one, are those ranking models open source? Like, are as in like, do you know what those algorithms are? And if so, like, do you think it would benefit from being more public? And if so, do you think, and if not, do you at the very least see this process benefiting from being done more with machines versus humans?
Yeah, no, all great questions. And I know you have some working knowledge of finance, and
Mhm.
I'll try to try to correct you, or try to
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
kind of pinpoint things like, so yes, S&P and Moody's are rating agencies. S&P 500 is the index, has nothing to do with
Oh, sorry.
that, but that's just something that's confusing. But generally, your question are very good. So to first talk about rating models themselves, right? So rating models typically, it's going to apply to several things: specific companies, countries, even specific products, or sometimes bonds. So like an issuance from, let's say, a sub entity. That doesn't necessarily mean it reflects just the credit rating of like a specific entity. It could be like combined, kind of a tranche, let's say, or like a slice of multiple things that got combined into a product. So those are what we call sometimes structured products. You could have loans in there, you could have like credit cards, loans, you could have car loans, you could have corporate debt. Like a lot of these things sometimes get structured into kind of one product that an investor can buy on the market. And so rating agencies also have to come in and kind of give you a rating, like how good is this product, generally speaking, from a credit perspective. How likely am I to get back the money from this product I'm buying, or the cash flows, basically, even though it's a very diversified and complex product. So to answer that question of how these rating models work, it's typically a combination of a rating model itself that is based on modeling that they have based on a lot of data that they would have on performance of loans, of the underlying, of countries, macro models that look, for example, at the performance of a country. And then you typically have kind of the analyst overlay, or the kind of analyst component, where it's someone who actually looked at that data, has knowledge of the past, has knowledge of that specific country, has been, for example, if you're talking sovereign debt, let's say, you have analysts that spend 15 years in the sovereign debt market, they look at the trends, etc., and then they add like their flavor to the rating. um, so typically what happens is that these companies will not release the full like code or box of how their model works, but they'll tell you how they're rating stuff. They'll tell you, well, we are giving a portion of 10% to credit worthiness. We're giving 10% to like strength of the balance sheet. We're giving 10% to this, that, and etc. But they won't tell you exactly how it's being modeled. But they'll tell you exactly how they think these components are performing, and which exact component is impacting the rating that is giving to like a specific product, right? So let's say a country is getting downgraded from those ratings you always hear about, let's say triple B to double B. They'll tell you this is a reflection of this component because of this thing that is happening in this market or in this country. So this is how typically these company works, and the reason why they won't tell you exactly how they're modeling things is because there's no patent on this, right? Like, there's no IP on that kind of stuff. If I see a model out there and like a rating agency is divulging all of its model, I can instantly go and use all of these models myself and not require their service anymore. It's a bit more complicated like that because when a rating agency gives you a rating, it reflects also all the power and all the expertise of that agency. You can't just open an agency right now, call it S&P version 2, and start giving ratings and people will start looking at it. Most likely no one will care. They will only care about the big ratings. That's typically what investors do. They look at top 4, top 5. There's hundreds of, I don't know if hundreds, but there's at least 10 rating agencies that I know. Most people look at the top 3, like Fitch, Standard, S&P, and Moody's.
So
Those
so
are kind of
um
the main
so
guys.
so I'm gonna interrupt you there because like there's a few segues into a few other questions that I'd like to cover with you. So first
Mm-hmm.
off, like I think you made this distinction between like algorithmic trust and company trust, and I would say like
Mm-hmm.
in machine learning, typically like let's say I publish some result and I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
here's the best image classifier in the world. Like no one will trust me because it's me. Even if I'm a nobody, people will trust me as long as they can verify the output of my algorithm. But it
Mm-hmm.
seems in finance that you really can't decouple who is making the prediction from the prediction
Yeah.
itself to figure out whether you should trust it or not.
Yeah, there is a lot of that in many industries. I wouldn't say it's just specific to finance. I mean, think about it this way too. Like, you can prove the most crazy theorem there is right now, and you can publish it in a paper. You can even get it published, have a good thesis rating, and you won't necessarily reach fame. Whereas if a professor that is established, or a machine learning scientist that is established at a big company, if he publishes that paper, it will instantly get that gravitational pull. So it's a bit like that in finance as well. Like, you have to build credibility, you have to build kind of goodwill before you get taken seriously, and this applies to almost many things. I don't think it's specific to finance, but I think that's a very good thing to highlight. That you could have the best analysis in the world, if you don't have some pedigree or some kind of credibility coming from somewhere, it's going to be very hard to do something that is actionable on that information. Unless you're a private investor and you have millions and you just, you have your own models, and that's how you do things.
Like yeah,
Um,
like either you're rich or you're very influential. Otherwise, like your opinion doesn't really matter in finance. It sounds like.
That's
Uh,
right. I mean, yeah, I mean, and again, like typically, for example, we talked about ratings, like rating targets, for example. Let's talk price targets. Like, when you go and you look at the price of an equity right now, let's take, a big name, like we're taking Google. The price of Google right now is always compared to what is the agreed price of what that stock should be based on multiple market analysts saying, well, I've done this analysis, I have my models, and the price target I have for this equity is like X, right?
mm,
And so you have thousands of people that will cover the same equities, but probably only between 1 and 5% of opinions here really do matter. And it's not about just who has the better model, it's who has the best track record, who has the biggest name, basically based on his history at covering these companies, where he has worked before, etc. And this is how the market is going to interpret this information. They're always going to weight their opinions and also their interpretation more favorably on those high-end, big caliber market analysts
mm,
versus the lower caliber, fresh green analysts that you have out there. And it's the same for the rating agencies. Like Moody's, S&P, and Fitch could come up with a triple A rating. If some unknown rating agency comes with a single B, which would be catastrophic for a triple A company, it wouldn't move the market so much. Maybe people will start looking into it to see, like, is there anything important that these other big boys or big
mm.
companies missed, but it typically will not have a big impact. And so we see that a lot, across the world. It doesn't matter if you're looking U.S. market, emerging markets, etc. You always have kind of the experts leading the way, and you have the challengers that come and say, "Well, in your analysis, I don't see that you took that into consideration. If you add that as a variable, as a dependent variable that should move the price or the rating, etc., you should see a deviation from what you're modeling." And these interactions do happen on a daily basis, and they do exist. It's not to say that the market is completely disconnected most of the time, but there's definitely always room for improvement. And we saw that in 2008, where until the eve of the crash, you had trash and completely garbage mortgages that were assigned AAA rating, that were being sold at 1 cent for the dollar, which is a 99% loss of the value of that product. So you do see that happen, but again, it's as an investor, you simply don't have the time to give everyone in the world that has an opinion value. You have to pick and choose who you're going to trust and listen to.
So that's interesting. So there's kind of two points I want to explore here. So the first one, it does seem like if you're taking the opinion of a bunch of analysts, that there it's not like you're uniformly weighing each one. It's that there's definitely power laws where the big ones you're weighing way more than everyone else. And the reason we're doing this is because we're saying like the bigger ones are more reputable or we trust more. So I was wondering if you could define that a bit more, because I like my concern in a lot of these issues is that we tend to conflate past success with a big office. But really, like, let's say in academia and machine learning, what happens a lot in, let's say, time series analysis is that people will try to backfit the model on the past and they'll be like, look, we're getting great accuracy on the past. But really, like, the best measure of your predictive power is like, are you actually predicting the future, not predicting the past? So would you say, like, this is something, first off, like, if you compare academic finance versus real world finance, do you find that one goes into one camp versus the other? And overall, do you feel like people understand very well that predicting the past is not all that impressive, or do you still see this mistake being made?
So yeah, I mean, once you enter kind of the finance world, you realize that a disclaimer you always see is, when you're showing your performance as a fund, as a company, anything that has to do with basically presentation material that is here to represent yourself. There's always that is the disclaimer that past performance doesn't guarantee future gains or future expectations, right?
Mm.
But end of the day, this is the best thing you have for now. Like, think about it this way: what is the difference between two models in performance beyond back testing and kind of previous calibration? right? So
Mm-hmm.
your calibration is going to be on the past data that I have. I'm going to build on a model. It might be overfitting, or it might be not. There's a lot of tests that can do that, right? Statistically speaking, we have a lot of statistical tests that try to kind of seek out these overfitting issues. And there's also backtesting, right? You're saying, well, I'm not going to fit my model over the whole data that I have. I'm going to use it on 90% of the data. And then the 10% data that is remaining that I haven't used to model on, I'm going to use my model to on that data, or to kind of compare my input variables versus that data, which is the output variable, and see how much my model is close to these. Right, this is kind of backtesting. You're actually using or like testing the predictive power of your model on existing data, even though it's supposed to become a future predicting model, which is best thing we have next to predicting the future. Um,
Well,
so I think in the
like
yeah.
here's I guess where I would argue slightly against that. So for example, let's say I tell you, well, like you have some sort of algorithm that you think can beat the market. Like why not, for example, make that algorithm run live on $1,000 and then report back the performance after a year? I don't know if there's such
Yeah,
a
again,
way
that's
that measure that
backtesting.
much.
That's
Oh,
backtesting.
oh,
This is
okay.
backtesting.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But again, when you're selling a product, you're selling the product for future. Like you're saying, well, I've made 20%, and I've run this model these 2 weeks on data I haven't modeled on, and it's still giving me like pretty decent,
Uh-huh.
let's say 15%, 17%. But you cannot guarantee that number to an investor. Like that would be
Yeah.
misrepresentation.
Okay. Got it.
So I think that this is like something that is fundamental, and any company that doesn't do that, that doesn't do these disclaimers, is basically acting in an unethical way, because it's misleading investors. So I mean, this is a very touchy point, because obviously, an environment that has strong governance, that has laws, etc., you should be able to sue a company for misleading you into something that was promised and that you didn't receive. So again, these are not promises. These are just, well, I've been running 100K miles very easily in the past, and I promise to do the same in the future.
Yeah.
Nothing guarantees that, but I'll put my money on the guy who has run 100K miles before than someone who's green and telling me, well, I've been practicing in my gym and I think I can do it. Right? It's kind of the
Yeah.
same
Absolutely.
basic analogy. Um, so yeah, I think in that sense, um, uh, companies will go with the guy who has done his homework before, or has kind of something to show for, even though it's not a guarantee of what's going to happen. Like if you could have picked like the best company to put your money with, or the best rating agencies, etc., and you probably lost money in the market if you hadn't done any kind of hedging strategies back in March of this year. So there's again no guarantee, there's no foolproof strategy, and a lot of people in the academia will tell you, well, if you're really adjusting all of the time, the risk you're taking on these products, you're never going to beat the market. Like that's the basically what you call the um, market efficiency theory,
Mhm.
or hypothesis, that if you're adjusting returns to the risk associated with the correct risk, right? Then there's the issue of, we don't know how to capture correctly the risk.
Mhm.
We do our best, but if you were able to have that pure perfect tool that captured the risk, you will never beat the market. Like your expected return from picking the products is always going to be equal to the expectation of what the market is returning on the general on everything that's happening, basically.
So maybe this is a good segue into the next question. Like, let's talk a bit about modeling risk, because,
Mhm.
like there's kind of like, the way I see it, two kinds of risks. Like one is, for example, like risks that you would expect. Like for example, it's winter and I went out of my home without an umbrella. Like there's an inherent risk that I would get wet, but it's not an unpredictable risk. Like it's a very predictable risk, but just not
Yes.
guaranteed. But then there's this other kind of risk, which is like, well, we have a pandemic, well, we have like mass protests, and so like I wonder, like how do people think about this stuff? Because I guess
Mhm.
again, my concern here is that it's very easy for those unforeseen risks, or very large scale risks, to kind of say, well, nobody else could have seen it coming. But it always seems like some people do. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's just a coincidence. And so I kind of wanted to get your take on how do people go about modeling that second type of risk.
Yeah, so it's basically, like modeling what is known and then modeling what is unknown, right? So it's kind of two type of models, and we get into something very complicated when we start realizing that what is unknown, even though happens very very rarely in theory. I mean, 2008 and 2020 are not so far apart. That these things can wipe you out,
Mm.
right? So you essentially have a very like, I mean, it's debatable how small it is, right? Because if it's happened frequently and it's wiping you out consistently, like, it's not that small. Like, I mean, this is a big issue that you may have, and you can't say, well, I'm 99% always accurate on the modeling part that of what is known, but if you're consistently getting wiped out every time that 1% hits you, like, you're just not going to survive as a business. But I mean, there's a lot of books and there's a lot of research and there's a lot of practitioners that have talked about that, the fat tails, how you should be modeling that. Most companies are not modeling it, they just take a standard approach. And I think that is still the case. Most companies, I think, model what they know, and then for the unknown, they'll try to put some capital aside to protect them against that. And they'll try to model the unknown using different statistical techniques, for like big events happening, using different types of distributions. But end of the day, it's like, how much cash can you or capital can you put aside to kind of protect you from an unpredictable event, right? And this is kind
Mm.
of what happened in the banking industry after 2008. And this is why today, because of the regulations that happened after 2008, banks are not in such a bad position as they were back then. And this is the simple reason that typically, how does a bank work? Like, they'll have a book, right, a balance sheet. They'll see, I have these products. I'm going to model the typical risk I believe these products have, like this random guy not paying back a loan, this company going bankrupt, etc. And I'm going to put reserves on the side, like provision for loss. Um, Now, after that, we realized this is not enough, because this is just what is you're modeling, and you're putting aside cash for something you're probably going to lose. But what about the stuff that you don't know that you're going to lose? What are you putting aside for that? And the answer in 2008 was, well, almost nothing. Um, so yeah, and this was not just a U.S. thing. This was in Europe, and I would argue the Europe actually lagged behind after 2008 in terms of kind of bolstering how much cash they should be putting aside. And this is a pure issue of profitability. Like, if your company is not profitable, you can't just sit on cash like this. You can't be like, well, yeah, well, I want to sit on 50% more cash to protect myself against an unknown, and not do any and not generate any money with that cash that's sitting, right? So that's going to hit your margin. You're gonna not going to be as profitable. You're going to lead into your stock price dropping, layoff, things like that. So it's just not good for the health of your company. In the US, though, what happened is that we had a few law bills that went into law, and that basically forced all financial institutions that are governed by the various watchdogs to kind of put a fixed amount of money on the side, like 20%, 30% of capital. And so basically, the way you see it, your reserves are going to protect you against losses that you can model and that are known. And then the capital is going to be put aside for the unknown portion, whether or not you're modeling it correctly. Like,
All
you
right.
have some you have some leeway as to like how good your modeling is for that unknown portion, but there's almost always going to be a minimum now, and that's the law. Like, by law, even if your model is telling you, like, oh, you just need 10% of capital for that unknown, you have to go back and add another 10% to reach the minimum target of what you should be putting aside for that unknown portion.
So this number is interesting, like 20%. Like, I'm wondering, do you feel like this number is kind of scientifically determined, or it's sort of pseudo-scientifically determined?
I think it has been determined based on like studies of how big losses have been on specific products, and especially like after using your reserves, how big your buffer needs to be able to protect you against a shock, right? This is the issue that most politicians focus on now, like the domino effect. If I shock the economy enough, and that only one piece of the domino starts falling, I still need to intervene. So I need to make it so that no domino piece is going to fall, because it's like, again, we're in a global economy. No company is operating on an isolated basis where everyone can fall around her and she'll just keep standing.
Mhm.
You have your counterparties, you have your partnerships. Typically speaking, if one piece starts falling, it's gonna bring everyone else down. So this has been the focus, and this is why you've had these kind of non-movable barriers that if you want to be in this market, if you want to invest, if you want to work as a company in the US, etc., you have to abide by these specific rules where we're making sure that you're not going to fail. Because if you fail, it's a bigger problem for all of us. So this is kind of the logic that has been
Mhm.
going into it. Unfortunately, for companies, it's a big constraint, which hits your profit, because again, this is essentially cash that sits on the side. Like, we do stuff with that cash. It's not to say that this is cash sitting
In a safe.
in a checking account and that you don't touch it. But what you can do with that cash is extremely limited, and therefore you cannot generate a lot of return using that. And so for companies, this drives down your profitability, and that's always going to be a problem. A company never wants to see idle cash sitting on its balance sheet doing nothing.
So, 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 so,
This
so, so it's interesting you mentioned that because like when I think of the quintessential example of a company that had a ton of cash just sitting around doing nothing, like I think of a company like Apple. So,
But they do stuff with the cash.
oh,
Apple does stuff. They tell you they have the cash on the balance sheet and that it's liquid, but that doesn't mean they're not using the cash to do operations on the market to kind of get short-term returns. Like, I know for a fact that Apple and Google, cash rich companies, they have teams that manage that cash and that get a return on that cash. But that cash is kind of very liquid, in the sense that if the company identifies a 500 million purchase they want to do tomorrow, they can be actionable and actually go through the transactions because they have that liquidity at hand, right? There's a difference between like solvency and liquidity. Like solvency, liquidity means that you can use specific products or cash on hand to do immediate purchases. And then solvency issues is when, like, you can do the purchase, but you need 2-3 years to get out of a first investment to go into a second investment,
I
right?
got you.
And
So for them, for
yeah,
example, it's not necessarily a constraint on liquidity. It's more like they want to keep like a sort of opportunistic mind where they need to be able to convert
yes.
to something liquid to make a purchase quickly. And so
Mhm.
like that's even interesting to me because like how would one go about making the case that we need like $1 billion worth of liquid money versus $2 billion? Like how would that
Yeah.
argument work out?
I mean, I don't work in these
Huh.
in those companies, and I don't know what their strategy is. I mean, Amazon, for example, I've seen a huge capital spending, and
Mm.
and a lot of it, some of it leads to amazing stuff, obviously, and makes them this such big diversified company, and some of them just go down the drain.
Mhm.
So again, I don't really am an expert on their logic of how they're using their cash on a daily basis, but I just know that right now that cash is sitting there and it's available to be actionable, and at the same time, it's not just idle cash. They're actually generating returns using that money.
I see. That's interesting. Like, and so I guess like now that we've talked about companies quite a bit, like I was kind of curious to hear your take on more of a like how central banks would go about using machine learning. So specifically, like the way like what I'm aware of is that central banks kind of have like one giant knob they can turn, which is like interest rates, and then they can also control like the just the supply of cash in the market, and so. What do you think about this? Like are the decisions to vary those numbers mostly a political constraint, or and if it's a mathematical constraint, like how would you go about modeling these problems to figure out what's going to happen? Just because like it's even more complex than a government, because like if you change one thing, it has this percolating effect over the behavior of all like the whole world and all companies in the U.S. And so how do you think those arguments would generally be constructed to decide, should we lower them, should we increase them?
So yeah, I mean, there's this idea that I mean, in my mind, there's this idea that the bigger you are, the more wide your institution is, etc., the least you'll be nimble. In the sense that, first you have to see, are small companies in this industry adopting the technology? Because if the small companies are not doing that, then the larger companies are definitely not doing that either.
Mm,
And that's because when you're a small company, adopting a new system is easy, and adopting a new technology is easy. Like, your team is what, 20 people? You go on a session, you learn about the technology, you go buy it, everyone starts working on it, and you're done. When you're talking about an organization like my organization that is multiple tens of thousands of people, and you're trying to change a whole system, like, you're talking a multi-year project here. It's not
mm,
going to be something that you can do overnight. And so central bank is kind of like this as well. In the US, you have branches that are in multiple of the different states and in big cities. My understanding is that they don't use extremely complicated models. They have their models. I don't know if they're machine learning models or not. But generally speaking, they try to always communicate a view that they have, first of all, to the public, and then kind of always try to be credible to the public that what they do, and that the different knobs that they have, which you mentioned, one of them is interest rate, another is kind of control of money, if you want, or money printing, that these are credible tools that they have to actually influence the market, that the way that they need the market to behave.
mhm,
And the issue is with central banks, the issue is that they don't have actually uh, full power. They're not this entity that just can control an economy. And there's a big issue that happens when a central bank no longer becomes credible. When they're saying we're lowering rates and therefore things are going to go better, and just market participants don't respond to this. And the trend that was going on before the announcement is the same after the announcement. And this is like one of the major things in central banks right now that I think is much more influencing than anything else. Like, going out and saying, well, we're lowering the Fed rates fund to 0%. That doesn't mean that the whole market rates are at zero, right? It's just a signal saying, well, we're pushing rates to go this way, but that doesn't mean necessarily that rates are going to go this way.
mhm.
Um, and so the credibility that the central bank has, and here that the Fed has, is what will really push towards those that kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, I believe that what they're doing is going to impact the rates, therefore I'm going to start making actions believing that this is happening. And as everyone does these actions, the action actually occurs, right? So
Interesting.
if everyone's pulling out of the market and no one's buying, no one wants to buy a product, the price of that product will collapse. If the price of that product collapses, the yield, which is another word for interest rate, will go incredibly high. But if everyone starts buying back that product, the price will go back up, and then the yield goes down. So this is kind of how interest
So,
rates
so this is
it
interesting
has always
because
a direct relationship with price. So and market participation is the first thing that will impact price.
so this is interesting because it reminds me of I don't know like how popular his ideas are in finance, but it reminds me of like George Soros's reflexivity theory. Is this what
Mhm.
you're referring to, where like your beliefs can end up influencing the behavior of a system? So it's just by you
Yeah. I
observing
mean,
it or
this is what the market is. This is what the market is. The market is basically a system of belief about what the future holds for you or for the economy. Like now in the papers, you listen a lot of people saying, well, the stock market is not the economy, and therefore stock market's going up, economy's crashing down, protests everywhere, threat of a second wave, blah 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 blah. This is true to an extent, but end of the day, the market is basically the future expectation of the economy. Like, it's not current economy. I agree with that. It's not just about how much money you're making now and how good your economy is going right now. It's a
Mhm,
question of, in the future, what is your expectation? And
mhm,
if your expectation is not good as it was yesterday, stock market should go down. If your expectation is better than what it was yesterday, you feel like in the next 50 years you're going to do better than what you thought you were going to do, then stock market will go up. So it's not that the stock market is I mean, dissociated with the economy. It's just that it's not tracking it in the way that people typically understand. Like today, I see I lost my job, therefore market should go down. It's like no,
Mm-hmm.
well, in 2 years you'll get your job back, and it will be just a blip in
In the
your
grand scheme.
lifetime of earnings, and therefore like has your value gone to zero because you lost your job today? No, not necessarily. It means that maybe your total value should go down from 100 to 98. Right? If you're living for 100 years and you're working those 100 years and you
Mm-hmm.
only lost 2 years out of 100, then your expected value should be 98
Mm-hmm.
instead of 100. It shouldn't go down to zero. So again, now we start entering like behavioral finance and how markets react to news and things like that. But this is generally what Soros talks about, or he's not the only one. Like this is something that, I mean, behavioral finance and that type of those types of theories are studied in university, and you have research papers done about that, and it's also practiced in the industry and finance.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, it doesn't mean that all of this goes hand in hand. Like you have behavioral finance model that go completely against, for example, what you have, what I just talked about before, which is the market efficiency. Like some behavioral economists, some behavioral finance practitioners, they'll tell you market efficiency doesn't exist at all, not even a strong form, weak form. It's all crap. Like this, it's all about fear, greed, reacting to news. It has nothing to do with how markets are efficient. It's just the view of the investor at that point in time that determines what the price are and how the price will be in the future. So again, I mean, there's a lot of theories around, and a lot of different companies will use different strategies, whether related to machine learning or not. I can't really talk to that, but I know that
So
this is a fact.
so actually like this is related to machine learning because so okay so I think what we're at a high level talking about is that like is the market still efficient given that we know that individuals in of themselves make irrational decisions, because I feel like, I mean, I'm not going to generalize to anyone, but I feel like even for myself, I feel I make irrational decisions all the time. Most of the times when I think I'm making something logical, by following some sort of math formula, it's I've already decided beforehand what I believe is true, and then I look for formulas that would validate like my existing beliefs. Um,
Mm.
and so like so I guess like one solution to model this stuff is what I see in reinforcement learning, which is, well, like, we can build some models for people and how they behave, some sort of agent, and buys stock at some rate, is greedy at this rate, etc. And then after those simulations, like, run a bunch of simulations and then look at the aggregate behavior and kind of measure, well, despite these known irrationalities that we've built into the system, is the end level system still rational or not? Like, have you seen any studies that have attempted to do
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like this?
and this is, you're describing market. How do you? Well, I forgot the term for it. It's like market consensus,
Hmm.
right? So what is market consensus? Like we're not all the same. Like all our market participants are not all um, don't all have the same view.
Hmm.
Like even take a single company. Like you probably don't perceive Google, or I mean, I'm focusing here on tech, but it could be any industry. I mean, what's happening with the consumer products. Like you don't have the same view that I have.
Okay.
Another market participant, like even an experienced one, won't have the same view as someone that has that same level of experience. But end of the day, the your stock price is gonna always kind of be at one point, right? Like you have a consensus saying, end of Friday, the 5th, uh, Google was at a price of X,
Hmm.
right? So you have a consensus that this is a fair price for this security as of today. If not, then more people would have bought that security and the price would have gone up for that
Hmm.
stock. So market consensus is basically saying I have a whole distribution of people, and all of them have different opinions. I'm taking the average of all of these opinions and I'm getting to a
Hmm.
single point. And this is what you were just describing. You're saying, well, on one side of the curve I have, or one side of my data, I have like people that are super greedy. On the other side, I have people that are super fearful. Other are more in the middle. They don't have, like, they have a typical risk aversion kind of relationship. And I'm like, if I take the average of all of that, like this is what my model is telling me the price should be. So there are models like this. I don't know if they're necessarily necessarily like reinforcement type of processes, or if you're just trying to, because you can go like bottom up or top down, right? You can say, well, in general, like I'm gonna just try to take like very high level macros or high level factors and just try to model like the typical agent, or you're going to go super gunner. You're going to be like, hey, there's 300 million people in this country. I want to model each of them to get like what the expectation is. So you can go like both ways.
So I guess this is a good segue into what I wanted to talk about next. I think that may be a longer question, so it's okay if we break it apart to many sub
Yeah.
questions.
Okay.
But like what are in your minds like things that you like when you see people talk about, let's say in general, ML and finance? I would imagine quite a bit of the discussion has these very high level slides, and they're like, oh, it's going to be transformative for our business, or it's going to make us more efficient. So
Yeah.
like in that spirit, like what do you think are the biggest misconceptions where you don't think math or machine learning would be helpful for making any sort of finance decision, but yet you still see
Yeah. I
these
mean,
memes spewing about it?
where it's helpful, or where is it only unhelpful?
No, let's talk about the unhelpful part, and then we can get back, because I think we talked about the helpful stuff quite a bit already. Let's talk
Yeah.
about the unhelpful.
So I think, it's with like any new, for lack of a better word, like sexy technology. Like people come to you and they're like, oh, well, like, have you heard of machine learning? It's like this new thing that, everyone's using, and we should, like, this is typically the guy who has no clue of what's going on. And he's like, and there's a lot of managers and companies that want to impress, right? And so if you want to impress, you need to be in these things, because that's where, value is seen. And so they'll come and they'll be like, yeah, like we should do something like this. I don't think anyone's doing stuff like that, and it's new. We should learn about it, etc. And then that person reads, let's say like a 15-page kind of primer on machine learning, and comes back and is like, oh well, like seems like machine learning is mostly like statistics and like stuff that we are actually doing, but just using a different lens, and then can get used and has segues into other stuff, like we can start using AI into it, etc. And then like, yeah, exactly, so like, do you still want to do this or not? And then the response is typically, well, if we're already doing something that is similar, do we really need it? And I want to do something to show, for example,
Like let's
that
just
I'm
change our
active
internal
in it, but
branding.
not necessarily put too much resources on it. And I've seen this happening all like, it's been like 2 years at least, that every time there's like a project group saying, yeah, we want to start like a project that has machine learning, etc., etc. And then depending on the level of resources you're assigning to that project, what you're actually doing is going to be either very similar to what you've done before, or you're actually foraging and you're looking into new techniques and new things that are kind of pushed by people that actually have done machine learning in the past, and that not have just read a 15-page memo on it. So that
It's interesting you mentioned this, because it does seem like there's this very real human bias to want to impress. But I would have imagined that finance would be immune to this bias, just because like the best way to impress your manager is to make a lot of money, and the
Well, it
best way to
depends
impress
which
your
function you are in.
yeah,
Like my function is not about making money,
I
right?
see.
I'm in risk. My function is to better warn and better assess, like based on the risk that I'm seeing, is the price of this security, is the kind of return slash risk profile of the security good for us to keep it on the books. Like I don't really care too much about how profitable it's going to be. I'm just looking at it from perspective of, for the price that we bought it, from what we expect to get from the security, is the level of risk that we're taking appropriate, right? So it
I
has
see.
nothing to do with money. Like I'm not the person who's going to make the final buy decision. I'm not going to be the person who has kind of been attributed the again the revenue, and this is for for big companies. You're talking like those types of indirect contributions to profit. It's like 90% of the company,
Oh wow.
right?
Okay.
The people who are actually at the trading desk trading the bonds, the portfolio manager that makes because there's many different types of portfolio managers as well, but the portfolio manager that is the head of the strategy, right? That is instructing the traders of what to do. That's typically a very small portion. Outside of that, you have audit function, back office functions, accounting functions, risk functions, governance functions, like all these people, everyone could and think about it this way, like we talked about the rating agency, someone that's creating a rating model, he's not generating the money directly. It's the person who's selling the model to a company that wants to get itself rated that is bringing the money in, right? So again, actually for rating agencies, I would argue that there's a complete dissociation between the modeler and the kind of money making and not completely. I mean, obviously, it's you're once or twice removed, but the relationship is not as direct as what you just described, and that's just
But this
always
is
keep that in
interesting
mind.
because it kind of becomes difficult to trust the feedback of a rating agency. Like, for example, I would be a lot more willing to trust your risk assessment if I also knew your position. If you're telling me like, well, I hold these stocks and this is what I think the risk associated with them is, and I think it's low, then I really know that like that's really what you believe. Otherwise, uh,
But there's a bias
yeah.
too as well because we're a bit more in the fundamentals of
Uh,
finance, but here you're assuming every person is different, right? I mean, not assuming, it's true. Like every person is different. Like how I should be investing should be fundamentally different from how you're investing, unless we have very, very similar views of the market and what we want and what we're looking for,
mhm,
right? So if you're going to someone only based on a recommendation because they have already bought it, there's a bias there because they're applying their own personal view of investing to your case, which typically this doesn't work a lot. Like someone who's in his 60s, let's say, who is looking to retire in a few years, and someone is in 20s, 30s, and looking to grow in general, like your investment profile should be very, very different.
mhm.
And what you own and what you have and in your portfolio also should be very, very different. So this is why typically actually it's the other way around. You want to go with someone who's not buying stuff for you that he's buying for himself, because there's typically a conflict of interest that will happen there.
I see. Yeah, like you could otherwise end up in a sort of Ponzi-like scheme, I guess, if you're not careful. Um,
Not just the Ponzi, like
yeah.
it's if I buy stuff for other people of things that I already hold, the basic mechanic will be that the price will go up. If the price is going up, it's not a Ponzi scheme, right? I mean, it's not
You're
that you're
making money
buying
back, yeah.
something that is worthless, but end of the day, like if the price goes up, then it's to my advantage. So technically, there's always going to be that subjective lens that if I can do this, I want to do more of it. Like if I can, maybe if I can slip in like 10% of that product to everyone else that I already own, and no one will ask a question and no one will kind of challenge me on that, then I probably will do that because that means that I will profit from it personally in a very direct way.
Mhm.
So this is kind of the conflict of interest I'm talking about.
Interesting.
And this is why you always have to disclaim, like if you're making a recommendation and you have a relationship with that company that you're recommending, or if you own that company yourself, you always have to make that disclaimer that you, even if your recommendation is pure and true and has nothing to do with the fact, it's like you think it's so awesome that even you invested in it, even if it's that kind of pure mindset, you still have to make that disclaimer because there is a potential conflict of interest where
Mhm.
you will be benefiting directly from like a purchase that is happening. And again, so that's why typically you want kind of independent investors or kind of independent consultants giving you
Mhm.
advice that just look at your case, the case of Mark, and saying, well, I believe based on what you've told me and your story and your risk profile and what you're looking to get, that this is like the best combination you should be getting. And I don't own any of these stocks, but I think, or any of these products, but I think in your case, it's the best combination. And this is typically how advisory and finance is done. Like advisors will typically kind of not be trading stocks that they're recommending. They'll typically not have like a personal account and a trading account that is kind of has not very clear separations.
That's interesting. So, so I guess like given that we're also talking about kind of like incentives and how people would interpret like your prediction given who you are and stuff. One thing I wanted to get your take on was this. So in machine learning, typically, if you look at this debate among like narrow AI versus deep AI, You have people in the
Mm.
narrow AI community say like, well, you can use something like logistic regression, like you model all your classification problems or regression problems as a line, and then the weights
Hmm.
are interpretable. Even though the definition of interpretable changes from domain to domain, but then you have people in the deep learning community saying like this is all irrelevant. Like what is relevant is your performance on the end task.
Hmm.
And so, what is what is your take on how this is seen in finance? Like, let's say I have a very complex model. I have no idea what's going on in it, but it beats all of my peers' models versus my peers' models have a very simple models with a couple of weights, and it also seems to be doing pretty well, but it's not beating the complex model. Like, how do people think of this trade-off between simplicity and complexity? Especially that I do know that finance does attract like quantitative people, people with physics backgrounds or whatnot, but I'm guessing now it's people with computer science backgrounds as well. So how have you seen this trade-off played off typically? Like, especially like if you look at junior people versus senior people, how do they tend to think of
Hmm.
this stuff as well?
Yeah, so it's a very broad question, and
Mm.
I'm not gonna try to represent the whole industry. I don't know,
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
honest. It's very hard to give you an answer on that. I'll just tell you, top of my head, uh, first thing is you have like quant shops, let's call them, and then more fundamental shops. That's typically how things are approached. And fundamental shops will not have the most complicated models. They'll have, some of them won't even be using regression in some cases. They'll just analyze the financial statements of the company,
Mm-hmm.
and then like put in some expectation of future performance based on expertise that a specific analyst has on the industry and on the trends that are happening, and we'll give you a stock price.
So
Right?
this is
That
like
as
Berkshire,
simple as
for
that.
example.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Berkshire is not known as being, yeah, it's more a fundamental shop
Mm.
for sure.
Okay.
And so you have quant shops that, are hedge funds or teams within a company, etc., that purely and only make recommendations based on complex models that they have, based on the theory that prices move in a random way that is unpredictable. Using, let's say, stochastic models, typically
Mm.
speaking, using math that has been developed over 100 years almost. We're talking way back when Einstein developed like the Brownian motion and kind of
Mm-hmm.
proved that in a mathematical way. And I think in the 1905. Before him, when Bachelier was like the first guy who came and was like, well, I can use math and like randomness to kind of model the stock market in France. He was kind of really the first one to bring that to the table. And after that, you've had hundreds of years of high level thinkers, like very famous mathematicians like Samuelson, Fama, like big names coming in and saying, well, using all of that knowledge, you can build that type of model that can be applied to these types of industries, options, etc. And you don't need to know anything else. Like, you learn these models, you get the data, you feed the data, gives you an output. This is what you have actionable recommendation. um, and so you have both. And typically what you'll see is that those two worlds don't mix super well together. Like, a fundamental guy will maybe listen or like sit down with a quant guy, but there's no like fundamental quant shops that's not kind of very common in the industry. And maybe it's something that should be changed a little bit. I think, in my opinion, and I've seen that in a few funds, for example, where you come in with a model and then you have some kind of tactical overlay. That's how they call it. That you'd have an expert come in and say, well, the model is saying this. Maybe it's true long term, but right now I'm seeing this macro event happening, and I'm going to like tweak a little bit the attribution or the optimization that's happening to kind of move it towards this profile a little bit more for the moment, and then you'll go back
Mm-hmm.
to the stable or like to the long term view that you have. So this does happen, but those honestly, I haven't seen like funds that are super big like that so far. Like, it's interesting, and it does get like interest from investors, but typically like the bread and butter for a quant shop will be like a pure quant fund, and the bread and butter fund for a fundamental fund will be like a fundamental kind of investor fund. So that's what
So
I'm
just
seeing.
like drawing an
Um,
analogy from my personal experience, like let's say in the game AI community, uh,
mhm,
like typically, like let's say like you're building an AI for your own little game, like you could use a simple model and it's probably going to work fine. Um, but then, like, let's say for a complex game like chess, we're already, or
mhm.
Go, or any of these, or Dota, or StarCraft, like any of those games, we've accepted now that the non-interpretable deep models crush the interpretable simple models out of the water. Like, it's not even a competition. And in
Yeah, yeah,
fact,
yeah.
people that are arguing against this, I think, are just arguing against facts at this point. Because
Mhm,
the burden is on you to make a simple model that would outcompete these big models.
mhm.
So like let's
So we
say
don't have,
today.
yeah, I mean, in finance, it's not as easy because what is happening is that what you're doing is you run like a simulation of 1,000 games, and how many times am I beating that person? You do one model
Yeah.
versus the other. Like you run 1,000 simulation, and how many times is this model beating that model?
Mm.
The issue is that again, it's a question of who is behind the model. And there's many different models, and these models have to be constantly changed. Like there's this idea of there's an arbitrage, for example, or there's a specific strategy. That strategy will not work forever. I mean, that's in chess. If you build a program that is really at the
Like the
level
game
where it's
changes,
consistently
like the game
beating like
changes in some sense, and
yeah,
and
exactly.
the
Like
model doesn't reflect
you would
reality.
need to introduce something that's groundbreaking, right?
Yeah.
In chess to be able to kind of move the equilibrium from where it is now. Whereas in finance, the equilibrium is constantly moving every single year. So to be able to do those simulations, you can only do them in the past, and in the past it's worthless,
Right.
as we kind of said. Like you can, if you're running fundamental model on the past versus quant fund model on the past, and you're trying to do that kind of same analogy that you just did, like which model is better, you're just not going to get where you want to, because um, the issue is that these models are being updated always, and no matter what happens, the model is going to change. Like every year your model is going to change, and therefore if you're going to just run simulations every time over the past 100 years of the stock market, your model is going to have to be consistently beating every time the fundamental model, or vice versa,
Hmm.
for you to be claimed as a irrefutable fact that you're the better model. And this just hasn't happened. Like there's
So
just
So,
yeah.
Stephane, hold that thought. We have one question from
Mhm.
chat. So, this is from Krishnan PC, and he's saying, so probably this was covered, but Stephane, how do you define value? Is it purely in terms of money? And then he's also asking me, so to point back to your RL analogy, what would the value be in multiple agent reinforcement learning setups? So, like, how do you define value where people have different value functions? And does value have a relation to how close the internal model of the agent is to the true model?
Mhm.
So do you want to start with this part? Like, how do you define value, for example, for the most part?
So, I mean, value, I mean, let's take a simple case, right? You're taking a company, and you're trying to, there's the relationship between the price of the stock, like if you have $50 stock times 100,000 of outstanding, individual stocks, then, what the perceived value is. So here you're trying to say, well, essentially there's a direct relationship between the valuation and the price you're giving. And for a company, it's maybe the simplest example you can give, because I think once you go a bit more removed from the direct underlying, because for example, options, derivatives, it's a product itself that has value, but that is only derived from the underlying company. So it's not a direct relationship anymore. So let's just focus for now on
On the
the
simple
simpler
case.
case. Yeah, which is, you see that you have a company, you have the balance sheet, which has basically a snapshot of current and past performance. And you're basically saying, well, based on this information, can I get to the value? Can I create a value function based on only this information, and to get to a price? And the answer is typically no. Like that's just not going to work for you, because you have to have like a future expectation view of how this company is going to be 50 years from now, 100 years from now. Because if the company has been doing great and the balance sheet looks amazing today, and in 1 year no one's buying that product anymore because simply not like you were selling DVDs, or you were producing like discs, and today like everything is digitalized. Even though you had an amazing 20 years, your value is going to go to near zero very soon because no one's going to buy your product anymore. So the issue here becomes like really valuing future expectation and bringing that to the present value of today. Because I'm buying the stock today, I'm not buying it in 50 years when the
Mm-hmm.
value would have changed at that point in time. So I need to model two things at this point, which will bring you back to value, which is A, how much is money worth in 50 years? Right. So here you're talking about modeling interest rates, modeling discount factors, things like that. And B, you're trying to model specific industry or specific company returns in the future. And this is typically what is very difficult to do. And this is where you can take the fundamental route of valuation, which is, well, I'm an expert in this industry. I believe tech is going to be great. Amazon's going to crush everything. If a challenger comes with a new technology, it will just absorb it, like the way people are talking about Boom now. It's just going to be nimble in a way that it's just going to keep growing, that it's going to start replacing kind of old technologies. And I'm going to be very bullish. And this is a fundamental way. The other way to do it is to kind of use complex models that will assign probability distributions to different components of the business and try to really get to value in the future based on, like, let's say, like a Monte Carlo simulation of where I think all of these components can go to. And then once I have that value, I have like an interest rate model that tells me, like, I think the interest rates are going to go this way. And then that's where you kind of discount the value using that future expectation of the value of money, and you get to a present value. So this is for me what value is. Like, this is how you're going to get to that future kind of, not foreseeing, but like this is how you're going to be able to kind of try to capture future events to a current form today that is actionable on, buying or selling something,
Yeah.
based on that expectation.
So that makes sense. Like actually, the definition you highlighted, because like so Christian also like part of his question was how does this tie back to reinforcement learning? So in reinforcement learning, the way typically an agent would model how desirable it is to be in a certain state is by like looking at the reward it gets instantaneously plus some sort of discounted expectation of future rewards that it will get over all time. And so now the discount factor can change over people. What you define as reward could change over people. And I guess like it does tie back into it, but at the end of the day, it's even defining the reward function that seems to be the challenge because there's a sort of, like you said, two part of it, which is, expected future cash flow. I would expect that to very naturally in the reinforcement learning setting, but then in terms of fundamentals, like not so much. But what I find interesting about your comment is that, like let's say my experience, like when I downloaded Robinhood, for example, was that it was very easy to do this sort of like half-assed fundamental analysis where I'm like, I'm a user of Twitter, therefore I'm gonna buy Twitter stock, or like ideally, I enjoy Chick-fil-A, so I want to buy Chick-fil-A stock. And so like, but at the same time with modeling, like what I also see very often on Hacker News, like someone will just do some sort of like, I don't know, recurrent neural network model, and then they think it's like they're doing some sort of deep fundamental analysis, like when all they're doing is like overfitting on the past, for example. And so it seems to me like in both cases it's very easy to do them wrong.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
in fundamentals it's probably even easier because you don't even need to do anything. So I guess like one of my questions, like so how come like I feel like a lot of times when I look at people doing technical analysis on stocks, like let's say specifically in the crypto community, I see this quite a bit where people draw lines and they'll be like, oh well, this shape should be like an U or this shape should be blah. Like what do you think? Like is this pseudoscience? Because it definitely feels like pseudoscience to me looking at it from far away.
Yeah, so a lot. It's very interesting you bring that up because specifically crypto. Why is technical analysis like so prevalent in crypto? It's because essentially the unknown is unpredictable here. Like, you're
Yeah.
not able to model crypto um, in any way or form, from a fundamental basis or from quant basis. No one can come and tell you today what he thinks the expected value of crypto is,
Huh.
right? Like, you can't come and tell me like, oh, the crypto is like a company, it's producing cash flows. It's not. So any type of fundamental analysis is just gone. Like, you just cannot use that. And B, like any type of quant, quant modeling, like what's your data? What are you going to use? Like adoption of a of
So,
a of a
so
of a
actually,
new currency?
if you don't
Yeah.
mind, like maybe we can do something a bit interesting. So,
Mhm.
if you mind googling stock to flow, uh, and
Okay.
then you should see a Medium article by this guy called Plan B. Uh, if you don't
Look
mind,
into Bitcoin.
yeah,
Looking
yeah,
into Bitcoin.
modeling Bitcoin value with scarcity. That's the name of the article.
Uh, Wait, no, I don't see that. What is the name of the website on Medium?
It's on Medium, yeah.
You said?
I
Oh
can.
yeah, I see it. I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. Yep.
So if you don't mind, as kind of a final thing, do you mind? Like, I would love to hear you just kind of read it out loud and kind of think through it, because like there's people in the crypto community saying like this is the one true way, and it's like it's pretty unique in that like I haven't seen anyone model anything like this before. Part of it felt like pseudoscience to me, like the clustering, but on the other part, it was predictive. So I would
Mm-hmm.
just like love to hear your take, and I think it would, probably be a nice way to end
To end.
the interview.
Yeah. Okay. So
What I'll do is this.
it's Plan B, right? I think we have.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So before I jump into that, I just wanted to say, just my general feedback about technical analysis. Technical analysis for me, anyway, is a way to kind of try to capture behavioral finance without knowing anything about what's actually happening beyond the graph you're seeing right now, right? So it's kind of looking at trends, which is kind of a mark of behavior, and saying based on this behavior, it seems like market participants are fearful or they're bullish, etc. And therefore, based on patterns I've seen before, I believe that the behavior should be this in the future,
Hmm.
right? So it's your technical analysis is purely trying to capture investor sentiment, and that has nothing to do with the underlying technicals, right?
Hmm.
You That's why you can use technical analysis on anything you want without knowing a single thing about what you're trading. And this is very dangerous for
Which
me.
feels
I think
off, right?
analysis should only be used as a supplement, but not as the fundamental basis for making a recommendation. Like you cannot come and say like, oh well, a bullish sentiment, and it's actually a company, in China that is producing coffee,
Mhm.
and that there's a past of regulation issues. There's a past of like misreporting and things like that, and saying like, well, based on market sentiment, I think I should buy. This is typically going to get you in like very very big issues. I think technical analysis is great for timing your purchase. Like
Mhm.
you want to purchase the stock, or you want to sell the stock, but you don't know when. So you use technical analysis to see what market sentiment is to kind of better time what you're doing. Anyway, this I just wanted to kind
No,
of highlight this before I
no,
jump into this
that's
article.
actually fascinating you mentioned that, because it makes me think like a lot of investments that people would deem not risky, like let's say, I don't know, bank deposits in Lebanon. Like once you go into the details, like you don't take a technical analysis approach, but you take a fundamentals approach, you realize like you're being sold like, you know, like garbage essentially, like that. It's literally a Ponzi,
Mhm.
and you would have never seen it just
Yeah,
looking at the
if
metrics.
like you could be buying a garbage product, and if the past 10 years have been looking good for that product because people are also not looking into it, or for some reason they don't want to, and then you just looking at that graph, you're like, oh, great investment's been going great for 10 years, nothing to lose here, I'm just going to buy right now, like graph looks great, it looks great, and then you open yourself to a world of problems. Anyway, so reading into this article, so I see there's a quote saying the important thing in science is not so much to obtain new facts as to discover new ways of thinking about it. William Lawrence Bragg. All right.
Wait, I don't think we're reading the same article.
Oh, we're not. Okay.
Let me send it to you in chat. I apologize. I think I should
Yeah,
have
yeah.
translated.
Oh, no worries. I thought. Okay. Yeah, it's a different article. Good thing.
Yeah.
It's the same guy though. It seems that
Yeah,
published it.
correct, yes. So
Okay.
apparently this guy's like like a semi-anonymous quant, but I think a lot of the like people in the Bitcoin community that talk about like Austrian economics and the fundamentally good thing about it have been referring to this article as a way to say like it has intrinsic value, because the model does have predictive power and it's fairly simple.
Mm-hmm.
So I just
Okay.
wanted to get your take on it.
All right. Introduction. Satoshi published the Bitcoin white paper. Okay, created the Bitcoin Genesis block in January 2009 and released the Bitcoin code also in January 2009. So begins the journey that leads to a $7 billion Bitcoin market today. Bitcoin is the first digital object the world has ever seen. It is scarce like silver and gold, okay, and can be sent over the internet, radio, satellite. As a thought experiment, there's a quote here from Nakamoto. As a thought experiment, imagine there was a base metal as scarce as gold, but with the following properties: boring gray in color, not a good conductor of electricity, not particularly strong, not used for any particle, practical, or ornamental purpose, and one special, a magical property can be transported over a communication channel. All right. Surely this digital scarcity has value, but how much? In this article, I quantify scarcity using stock to flow and use stock to flow model Bitcoin's value. So, I mean, first of all, just disclaimer, I would need to Google what stock to flow is because I haven't heard that. Have I
Yeah,
heard that term before? I don't think I've heard it before, but
he defines it like it's
okay,
basically
right,
the total stock divided by how much more coins are being mined every day, and
okay,
uh, and so that you could apply the same model to gold or silver. So that's why he brings it up. So he'll define it though. So you can
okay,
continue.
all right. Yeah, I see him. He's going towards the scarcity theory. Okay, so dictionaries usually define scarcity as a situation in which something is not easy to find or get, and a lack of something. Nick Szabo has a more useful definition of scarcity: unforgeable costliness. And there's a quote here. What do antiques, time, and gold have in common? They are costly, due either to their original cost or the improbability of their history, and it is difficult to spoof this costliness. There are some problems involved with implementing unforgeable costliness on a computer. If such problems can be overcome, we can achieve a bit gold. All right. Precious metals and collectibles have a unforgeable scarcity due to the costliness of their creation. This once provided money, the value of which was largely independent of any trusted third party. But you can't pay online with metal. Thus, it would be very nice if there was a protocol whereby unforgeably costly bits could be created online with minimal dependence on trusted third parties and then securely stored, transferred, and assayed with similar minimal trust bit gold. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I generally agree with this. First of all, like this approach, um, I do think that it's not scarcity only that gives gold and silver their value, um, because if that theory would hold, anything that's scarce would automatically be very valuable, and this is just not true. Like, do you have a lot of metals that are as difficult to forge, are as difficult to process and to get, that are just not as valued as gold is? I think gold has a history. It had a purpose as well. I don't think the value of gold only goes down to the fact that it's scarce. Because if that's the case, you would have a lot of different metals that have also like that are very rare. There are some metals that I think that have at least or lower rate of like existence than gold that are just not as valuable as gold. So I think that I'm not an expert on this, but I
Again,
feel that this unidimensional approach is a bit
like this is interesting because I guess if you look at the periodic table, especially some of the heavier elements, you would expect the heavier ones to be a lot more expensive. That's a good
Yeah,
question,
I think
actually. I
they
wonder.
usually are, but I don't think that's just like a rule. I think how useful and how valuable something is perceived, and again, this comes down to a consumer's use or how what in what purpose this um, item can be used is what is going to define the value. Like something can be super rare if no one cares about this or it has no utility, no one is going to assign it value.
Mm,
right? Gold, for example, it's shiny, it's pretty, it's used in jewelry. Like, I think if you had removed that from the history of gold, it probably wouldn't have the value it has today.
mm,
So I think there's a lot of it's the same with like rubies and diamonds. Like, it's perceived value because it's rare and it's ornamental. It shows wealth, and there's attributed value to that, and therefore, yes, the price is high.
mm,
If you take something that looks like just like gray and not pretty, like, and another metal that was rare, like, people would not use it.
mm,
Same with steel. Like, steel is still very expensive because it has a lot of uses. It's not just about scarcity.
mm.
Anyway, going along with the article, not to go to sidetrack too much because we haven't even gotten to the
Yeah, to the
gist
meat
of it.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bitcoin has unforgeable costliness. This is correct because it costs a lot of electricity to produce new Bitcoins. I don't think this is the main reason why, but producing Bitcoins cannot be easily faked. Also, I agree. This is different for fiat money and also for altcoins that have no supply cap and have no proof of work. I think the supply cap is the most important thing that gives it the costiness. I don't think it is the cost of electricity right now that is
Mm.
really the reason why people are thinking that it's scarce. I might be wrong, but this was. I think now you just need so much more to kind of mine one coin than you had before, and yes, the costs do go up. But
Yeah.
that's all about supply cap. That's all
Yeah.
related to supply cap.
Yeah, so the idea is that in case someone is trying to come up with their own version of the core blockchain, that them maintaining that truth would be unforgeably costly. So I believe
Hmm.
that's what they're referring to here by the, and so that's the idea behind like proof of work as well as opposed to proof of stake in Ethereum, which
Okay.
Bitcoin has very strong opinions against. But anyway, we could just
Hmm.
keep going because I want you to see
Yeah.
the core model.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm getting there. Um, now he talks about Saifuddin Amus talks about scarcity in terms of stock to flow. We're getting there. SF ratio. He explains why gold and Bitcoin are different from consumable commodities like copper, zinc, nickel, brass, because they have high SF. There's a quote here. So for any consumable commodity, doubling of output will dwarf any existing stockpiles, bringing the price crashing down and hurting the holders. For gold, a price spike that causes a doubling of annual production will be insignificant, increasing stockpiles by 3% rather than 1.5%. Uh, it it is this consistently low rate of supply of gold that is the fundamental reason it has maintained its monetary role throughout human history. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
The high
we
stock
talked
to
about
flow.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The high stock to flow of gold makes it the commodity with the lowest price elasticity of supply. The existing stockpiles of Bitcoin in 2017, this is still part of the quote, were around 25 times larger than the new coins produced in 2017. This is less than half of the ratio for gold, but around the year 2022, Bitcoin's stock to flow ratio will overtake that of gold. Uh, do you know why in around the year 2022? Is it
Uh,
just like he's
like that,
tracking the trend?
like he's tracking the halvings basically. So
Okay.
like most coins are already minted, and so we're just gonna have a lot less over time. Whereas for gold, there's still a fixed supply of I think you believe like 3% or 1.5%, versus Bitcoin's reduces over time just algorithmically.
Okay. Okay. So scarcity can be quantified by SF, stock overflow. Okay, stock is the size of the existing stockpile of reserve. It's okay. So it seems like he's just going to try to model basically the ratio between what the stock is and what the ratio and the flow is, and he's going to say that because just trying to foreshadow, and he's gonna say that because of the halving, therefore the flow is going to go significantly down, and because of that, therefore the value should go up. Is that
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
basic
Exactly.
relationship?
Exactly.
Okay. Stock. I'm just, yeah. I mean, okay. Stock is the size of the existing stockpiles or reserves. Flow is the yearly production instead of SF. People also use the supply growth rate, flow over stock. Note that SF equals to 1 over supply growth rate. Let's look at some SF numbers. He shows gold, silver, palladium, and platinum. Gold has the highest SF. Okay, and then he shows that silver has a lower SF, palladium has an even lower one, platinum has the lowest. I'm just describing the table so
Uh-huh.
for the people who can't see. Um,
Well,
so continuing.
I'm actually showing
Oh,
the
okay,
page on
perfect.
the stream too.
On here.
So.
All right. Palladium, platinum, and all other commodities have SF barely higher than 1. Existing stock is usually equal or lower than yearly production, making production a very important factor. It is almost impossible for commodities to get a higher SF because as soon as somebody hoards them, price rises, production rises, and therefore the price falls again. It is very hard to escape this trap. Okay. Bitcoin currently has a stock of 17.5 million coins and a supply of 0.7 million per year. So that gives you an SF of 25. He just did a simple multiplication here, division/division. This places Bitcoin in the monetary goods category like silver and gold. Bitcoin's market value at current price is $70 billion. Supply of Bitcoin is fixed. New Bitcoins are created in every new block. Blocks are created every 10 minutes on average when a miner finds the hash that satisfies the POW required for a valid block. Then the first transaction in each block called the Coinbase contains the block reward for the miner. I mean, here it's just describing like a general process of the mining.
Yeah.
Block,
So feel free to skim stuff. You don't have to read
yeah.
that. No, it's okay.
All right. So here, so next, yeah, I'm at the graph where he's showing Bitcoin monetary inflation. Stock to flow and value. The hypothesis in this study, all right, is that scarcity as measured by SF directly drives value. So this is where I'm going to disagree.
Yeah.
I think this hypothesis makes it so that and I'm going to continue obviously reading, but this is where I'm going to disagree with the fact that scarcity is the only driver of value. I think this is completely wrong. Because if that's the case, I could go open a company, start producing something, doesn't matter what it is, slowly reduce output over time. And if I want to, in 1 year, stop complete production, and the price of whatever I'm producing is going to skyrocket. And this is, I mean, if we could all do this, we would be all rich tomorrow, because I can like sell a product that is worn socks from not even bathwater, from a streamer. It could be literally like, I don't know, like dirty socks from my little cousin from when he was like between 1 and 5 years old, and well, he grew to 6 years old, and like his socks are now bigger, and it's a different product. So there's limited supplies of these dirty little socks that only my cousin ever wore. And based on scarcity of supply, it should. So again, like for me, you like just establishing value based on scarcity. I think this is a very flimsy hypothesis.
So I would add just maybe an addendum there, because it's not just scarcity; it's algorithmic scarcity, and that like I still have to trust you not to,
Yes. You still have to trust the whoever
yeah.
controls the supply, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah,
Okay, so continuing, a look at the table above confirms that market value tends to be higher when, well, he's not taking, if his analysis were true, he would not just pick metals that have some kind of underlying value, like platinum, palladium. This is not just a random stock that like these have real world uses, and they have a history, etc. You can't, they have an underlying fundamental value attached to them, and the fact that they are scarce is what makes them more valuable. Right? I'm not saying something that valuable, if it's scarce or not, doesn't matter. I'm saying it has to be something that is valuable from the start. Like you cannot just take any product and say this product is scarce, and it's going to get scarcer, and therefore it should increase in price. Like, I mean, some products, their scarcity won't matter, and some others that have, like as he's saying, a interesting stock to flow ratio, yes, it will be very interesting, and it will be probably a high analysis object. And this is how gold companies or gold foraging companies are valued, right? What is going to be their output? Like we know that they're foraging like a precious metal, but for someone who's foraging like I don't know, like old dirt under a city, like no one cares. Like no one's gonna like whether they can do like increase their production by 50%. No one really cares that this is happening. It's not going to change the value of like the building that they're building. Anyway, I know I kind of
So if you like, because like everything here just repeats, like why don't you just go to there's the first chart why Bitcoin has value scarcity, and you
okay.
can kind of see what he's
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
do
I
here.
know what he's gonna do. He's basically gonna plot like the different SF
Sure.
relationship that he sees on products that have value that are metals like gold and platinum and
Exactly.
palladium, and is gonna say, well, if you're taking that same relationship and you're applying it to gold to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is currently valued at 70 billion, like the price is gonna explode because of the halving, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
correct.
mean, do I have something wrong? I see
No,
already
that's
the
it.
graph, like it
Yeah,
shows
that's it.
gold,
That's it.
silver.
Yeah, you're right.
Um, yeah. So I mean, again, it's close to technical analysis
Hmm.
in the sense that this analysis can be used on any product on which I have no idea what is going on, and I can just say, well, based on scarcity, value is going to go up, right?
Yeah.
It could have been Bitcoin, it could have been anything else. Like
Hmm.
why does this apply to Bitcoin and not to any other cryptocurrency that people don't value as much, but that have the same fundamental basis? Because there are challengers out there that have almost copy pasted the code behind Bitcoin and have the same type of blockchains that, but they're just not valued the same way because there's a network effect. Like there's more
Yeah.
people that know about Bitcoin. There's more people that Bitcoin has a bigger history, and so people are more comfortable buying that than jumping on the new wagon that could have no network effect in 2 years where no one is using that anymore,
Yeah,
right? So this,
like that. That's a good point because so I guess like there's two things I'm curious about validating after this call, which is first one, like what are examples of some really rare metals that like are very cheap? Like I think that would be an interesting counterexample. And I think the other interesting counterexample you mentioned, which is, well, like I think for an altcoin, it's not really a counterexample because the scarcity isn't a guarantee. But let's say you do something that you copy the Bitcoin code, like you just do a fork, like that fork doesn't have value, even though according to this analysis it should, because the same charts
yeah, yeah,
would apply. So I think
yeah.
like yeah, so I think those are the interesting counterexamples, and I think I will check those out
Yeah, I mean,
eventually.
I'm not saying I fundamentally disagree with what he's saying. I'm saying you cannot use this as a base of valuation of a Bitcoin, right? Again, it doesn't go very far for me. The same
Uh,
way as technical analysis doesn't go very far for me. Yes, you're describing a basic relationship. Yes, there is investment sentiment today that Bitcoin should be going up. So they buy Bitcoin, sure, why not? But I mean, you can take anything else and tell me investor sentiment is bullish and therefore buy that.
right.
Like why would I focus on Bitcoin beyond the fact that it's something that is scarce and that people find as attractive?
Uh,
Like there hasn't been like this is not again a model that a type of model, a type of analysis that will change the way I fundamentally view or value Bitcoin. For me, like
mhm.
there is no way to do that for now. Like for
Yeah.
now, there is just no way that you're fundamentally valuing Bitcoin beyond a trend. This is a trend. Again, he's taking a trend. He's saying scarcity, halving. I know that it's going to get halved, and taking the trend based on the current valuation. This is where I want to be.
Mm.
My question is, how did you get to the 7 billion valuation today? Like, how do you
Like it's
justify
not
that
exact. Yeah, it's
valuation
not.
today? Like,
Yeah.
if you cannot give me a model that gives me a justification of a valuation of a specific product at today's price, then I'm going to challenge you, tell you I'm not going to buy something. I have no clue what the underlying fundamental value of this thing is. Like, why would I go buy something that's costing me $5,000 if no one can like actually explain to me why the value has been changing over time beyond trends? Like again, trends is not something to which I can assign a fundamental value to. So
Yeah.
this is my issue with
My
that.
understanding of that is that after the original anchor point of selling the 10,000 bitcoins for two medium pizzas, that if you start that as your initial condition and then use the stock to flow ratio, it's fairly predictive of the value in the future. So he has a couple of other posts, but I don't think it's probably a good
Hmm.
idea of our time to go through them right now. But like we'll
Yeah.
talk about them more offline. Anyway, Stefan,
No, sure. I mean, this is interesting to me, and honestly, you see, talking about cryptocurrency, you see the finance industry actually going into that. Initially,
uh,
you'll hear that a lot of the big CEOs were saying like, no, this is not good, this is bad, etc. But there is some acceptance now. Like we're not like I'm not saying, um, I don't have this kind of old view that crypto or Bitcoin is bad and like stay away with it. It's going to be another crash. Like I'm not saying that. I'm just
but
saying
you're not willing to accept BS
no
because
one's
crypto.
presenting me with a model that is actually valuing the thing. They're just
Yeah.
telling me, well, value is this today, and I see a trend like that tomorrow, like based on the past
Stocks, therefore
tomorrow,
stocks.
and I think this is the value. Like no one's telling me, well, the cash flows of this or like the underlying. There's a model that I think Bitcoin is related to like this type of collateral or this like there's no such model like that today. So for me it's just very hard to tell you like is your valuation correct or not, what is the risk that you're taking. As long as I don't have these inputs, like I cannot give you a fair assessment. Like you might be very right and this guy might be onto something really good where scarcity might be the main driver. But again, my issue is yes, scarcity exists, but is the up like are you is your starting position correct? Like you're going from 70 billion, this is not a small number. Like or maybe are you taking, or is it overvalued at this point because a fundamental a imaginative fundamental model would come in and tell you, or like a quant model will tell you, well, the value should be 50 billion, and if it's 50 billion and you apply the same curve, then I need to wait like what, 5 years to get
To see
to the
exactly.
actual value it is today. And at that point, like 20 billion is a lot of money I've lost over 20 years. Like it's not something I could have made much more if I had invested in something else. So this is my issue with that, is that a trend on top of something that is unknown is kind of useless. So yeah, I mean again, I'll finish the whole article and I'll kind of give you my final feedback, but this is where I feel this is going.
All right. Stefan, I just want to say thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time. I think this is a longer session than I expected, but I really enjoyed it a
Yeah.
lot. So hopefully, like, let's talk more offline. I'm hoping we could do a second one
Yes.
because I think there's like I still have more open questions I want to go through.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
thank you so
definitely.
much
I
for your
mean,
time.
I would be very, interested in that, and maybe, we can talk next time more about the models themselves. I think we talked, I think, about different things, but, maybe there's a few things I wanted to talk, which we won't have time, but maybe next time, about different models that are being used in the
Uh-huh.
industry, and how all of these um, should have, at least in theory, like a lot of meaningful ways to improve thanks to machine learning. Because again, a lot of things that I see right now are very very manual.
Uh-huh.
And I think machine learning introduces the advantage of automation and of decision making that is done kind of outside of an individual. So these are things definitely I think we can add to our
So I'm
next
thinking maybe what
meeting.
we could do is like we could literally have you share your screen and either you in Excel or in a Python notebook, and we
Hmm.
could kind of just set some of the code up so it's very easy to run beforehand. But that's something I'm more than happy to help with. So just let me
Yeah,
know. Let me know how I can help.
yeah. I'll reach out to you and we can try
Yeah,
to set that up.
yeah,
All right, sounds good. Thanks for
awesome.
having me. And again, always great having these discussions with
Always.
you, and look forward to future ones.
يلا حبيبي. We'll talk soon.
All right.